He's calling you. So, throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. And then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "My teacher, let me see again." And Jesus said to him, "Go. Your faith has made you well." Immediately, he regained his sight and followed him on the way. Thus ends the reading of the word.
Thanks be to God.
Now you're saying to me, why the heck is she preaching on two blind men stories? Last Sunday she preached about the blind man in Bethsaida, and now she's preaching about the blind man in Jericho. What's that about?
Amen. Aye.
Is it not on? Well, I'll read the scripture again, right? What is that about? Should I read the scripture again? No. You got it. Okay, why is she preaching on two blind men stories? Why? She preached on one last week and she's preaching on another one this week. What's that about? The blind men of Bethsaida, if you remember. Bethsaida is a town, I'm a map of Israel, okay? This is the Sea of Galilee, and Bethsaida is up here, okay? It's up on the northern coast of the Sea of Galilee. 74 miles from Jericho, which is at the base of the foothills leading up to Jerusalem. So at the end of chapter 8, or in the middle of chapter 8, Jesus is in Bethsaida. And Mark does this on purpose. He has these two stories encircling the beginning of Jesus' journey to Jerusalem and the end of Jesus' journey as he's headed up the final trek to the city of Jerusalem. The blind man of Bethsaida begins the journey. And if you remember, the blind man of Bethsaida was where Jesus was confronted by the Pharisees who said, "Why don't you just give us a sign, incontrovertible proof that you are who people say that you are the anointed one of God, that you're the Messiah. Just show us." And Jesus says, "I'm not showing you." And his disciples, they get into a boat, remember, and the disciples are sitting there kvetching. Or in fact, they only have one loaf of bread. And Jesus is saying, "Don't you get it? We just did the feeding of the 23,000 with 12 loaves and a few fish. And you're sitting there kvetching over one loaf of bread. Here I am. Don't you understand? Here I am." Then he heals a blind man who is brought to him. And remember, he has to do the miracle with double stuff. It takes a lot of work. He has to do some work with this blind man. He puts spittle on his eyes. And then when the blind man says, "Well, yeah, I can see a little bit, but I can't see clearly." And so Jesus lays his hands on his eyes again. And he says, "Okay, now I can see clearly." The whole imagery of what can you see and what do you understand. And Jesus is trying to say, I'm on my way to Jerusalem and they still don't see. Here we are on the journey. 2 chapters, chapter 8 and chapter 9. During chapter 8 and chapter 9 is the first pronouncement story of his crucifixion and his resurrection, the transfiguration, the blessing of the children, the declaration of Peter that Jesus is the Messiah, and Jesus says, "Don't tell anybody. Don't say anything to anybody." And sternly, that word, epitomio, it's Greek, epitomio is the word for sternly, chiding, rebuking, don't tell anybody. So Peter's made his declaration, and then they bless the children, that he meets the rich young man, and the rich young man says, "No, I can't give up all my money," and then he does another declaration of his crucifixion and resurrection, and then he comes to Jericho. City of Jericho is an oasis in the desert. It is 853 feet below sea level. It is the lowest city, geographically, in the world. 2,500 feet above that is the city of Jerusalem, on the other side of the hills that are in the Jordan Valley. That road that goes from Jericho to Jerusalem nowadays is paved highway. But it's a famous, famous area. That wilderness, that desert between Jericho and Jerusalem is the place where Jesus probably spent his 40 days and 40 nights of temptation. It is the place where he confronted temptation. It is the place that King David called the Valley of the Shadow of Death, which is one of the reasons I wore this stole today. Every tourist who goes to Israel takes the ride from Jericho to Jerusalem, and they stop at the Valley of the Shadow of Death. Everybody is taken to the viewpoint to look over this incredible crevasse that is deep and cut away in the rock. And we stand over it and we recite either the 23rd Psalm or the 121st Psalm, I will lift up my eyes unto the hills. Now, is that a coincidence? And I had, 14 years ago, the privilege of reciting that 121st Psalm over the valley of the shadow of death. Jesus is in Jericho. Jesus is about to mount and make that final trek to Jerusalem, where he faces crucifixion and death. In Jericho, as he is leaving town, he is confronted by a blind beggar named Bartimaeus. Everybody's heard this story, but I don't know if anybody understands just how prophetic Bartimaeus is. Jesus has never been called by this name before. Did Bartimaeus know him previously? How is it that this blind beggar who sits at the side of the road calls out and recognizes Jesus as Son of David? Now, every Jewish person is a son of Abraham and Sarah, but not everybody is a son of David. Not everybody is the anointed of God, which is what King David was. King David was Messiah. He was Savior of God's people. Here is this blind man saying to this upcountry Messiah, who's surrounded by a crowd of fishermen and tax collectors and other scrabbly people, walking along the way, the road, the Jericho road, and this beggar, this blind man, yells out, Son of David, anointed one of God, Savior, Messiah, rightful King of God's people. All of that is contained in saying Son of David. The crowd, how many of you go to the movies and get really annoyed with those people behind you talking on the cell phone? Right? And what do? You turn around and you go, shh! Right? I heard a story about a lady who got slapped. She was so rude the other day to somebody. She got a sorry. I've been confronted in the movies when I told people to be quiet, and and they stood up and they. Sorry, talk all you want. I'll go to another movie. But this is the kind of rebuke that Bartimaeus received. This was the kind of rebuke that he, shh, be quiet. Can't you see we're busy over here? When he was told to be quiet, to shut up, and stop yelling at Jesus, he yelled even louder. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. up, and everybody just goes crashing into each other. I mean, that's my picture. But think about Bartimaeus. Think about what Jesus says to his disciples. He passes the message to his disciples. Tell him to come here. Call him to come over here. The man is blind. Call him to come over here. Bartimaeus receives the message. He's calling to you. You're in luck. And Bartimaeus throws off his cloak and jumps up. He jumps up. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to jump up with a blindfold on or with your eyes closed. But, jump up it's not a good balancing thing. But he jumps up. And the picture on the front of your bulletin of the blind man from Jericho is what I picture happened when he jumped up. There are all these paintings out there, famous painters who depict him being led over to Jesus, a man on each arm being brought over. But that's not what the text says. The text says that he jumped up and he came to Jesus. And Jesus said to him that the men are somehow face to face. What is it you want me to do for you? Now please imagine, if you will, this is a man who has been by the side of the road begging, and while begging, dreaming of what his life would be like if he could see again. Remember, this is not a man who's been blind since birth. He says, "Teacher, let me see again." He has been able in his lifetime to see. He has been someone who knows what life is like beyond those eyes that are blind. Tell me what it is you want me to do for you. Let me have my sight again. Jesus does not touch him. Jesus does not do the same work that he did with the man in Bethsaida. Jesus does not put spittle on his eyes or touch his eyes. Jesus doesn't do any of that. The two men stand a distance apart, and Jesus says, "My son, go in peace. Your faith has made you well." There's only one other time that Jesus says that in Mark's Gospel, and that's in chapter 5, when the woman with the hemorrhage touched the fringe of his garment and drew power from him, and was so nonplussed by her healing, and so afraid that she had offended, that she fell at Jesus' feet and said, "I'm sorry, I confess it was me." And Jesus says, "No, woman, go in faith. Go, your faith has made you well." Here again, Jesus has said, "Go. Your faith has made you well." Jesus didn't touch him. It was this man's heart, his insides, his decision, his prophetic moment of belief in Jesus that is what led to him being healed. Chance of a lifetime. It's a chance of a lifetime. What decision is he going to make now? Now that he can see again? Is he going to go home and tell the family, look, we're sick. I can see again. I can go out and I can get a job and I can work and we'll be okay. I don't have to be a beggar anymore. Is he going to go to all of his friends and dance in the street and say, "Here, look, I've been freed from my blindness. I am a new man"? The thinking, like, how many of you said, "When I win the lottery," the chance of a lifetime, "when I win the lottery, I'm going to buy myself a new house. I'm going to I'll buy a new house for my family. I'll buy houses for all my family members. And I'll travel around the world. And oh yes, I'll give 10% of the money that I win to the church." You all say that, don't you? Chance of a lifetime. What are you going to do when you are given the chance to begin again, to start all over again? numerous stories that we've seen now in Mark's gospel about every person that Jesus encounters being given a new chance, a chance of a lifetime, a chance to begin again, to live their lives in a new way, to live their lives differently. Their mistakes from the past have been given. They don't need to think about those mistakes from the past. They're gone. They don't need to think about all of the rotten things that happened to them in the past. Bartimaeus doesn't have to think about what caused him to be blind. He has an opportunity to start fresh. Oh, what would we do? What would we do with that kind of a gift? If we could breathe freely again, if we didn't have high blood pressure, if we didn't have diabetes, what would we do if we were young again, if we didn't have that arthritis that just makes life so difficult? How would we live our life? What Mark tells us is the choice that Bartimaeus makes is to follow Jesus. To follow Jesus. To get in line with the rest of the entourage and go with him to Jerusalem. To go with him in the triumphant entry into the city that is the city of David, the city of King David, the city of the Son of David. To go in with him and to follow him to the Garden of Gethsemane. This is the choice that Bartimaeus makes. No other choice but to place and understand that his faith is making him follow Jesus Christ all the way. To go with him all the way. We talk about his physical life being changed. Everything in his life will be changed. And when and if he ever comes back to Jericho, I doubt very much he'll be talking about what it means to see. More, he'll be talking about what it meant to be in the company of the one who gave his life for him. Let us go with him